Good day, creative spirit, and welcome. Jesus said, where two or three are gathered in my name, I am there. Light in our world, light in our community, light in our lives. Christ is with us. This is our sacred time. Wherever we gather, it is our sacred space. We acknowledge this land we are gathering on, the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, and the neutral nation Attawandaron. May we live with respect on this land and live in peace and friendship with all who live, work, and worship on it. All right, let's start with some singing this morning. Today. I can't say this morning. It might not be this morning for you. Voices United, 672, Take Time to Be Holy.
Take time to be holy, speak oft with your Lord, abide in him always, and feed on his word. Make friends of God's children, help those who are weak, forgetting in nothing his blessing to seek. Take time to be holy, let him be your guide, and run not before him, whatever betide. In joy or in sorrow, still follow the Lord, and looking to Jesus, still trust in his word. Take time to be holy, be calm in your soul, each thought and each motive beneath his control, thus led by his spirit to fountains of love, you soon shall be fitted for service above.
Oh, there's a good one. There's an oldie. Take time to be holy, which is exactly what we do here at Creative Spirit. And our next hymn will be 260 in Voices United, God who gives to life its goodness. 260.
God who gives to life its goodness, God creator of all joy, God who gives to us our freedom, God who blesses tool and toy. Teach us now to laugh and praise you, deep within your praises sing, till the whole creation dances for the goodness of its King. God who fills the earth with beauty,
All right. Our reading today, one second, let me just grab my reading today. Our reading today comes from a book called The Artist's Rule by Valters Paintner. And the section that I'm going to read to us today is a reminder. It's a reminder about what we do here at Creative Spirit. And it's called The Sacred Art of Living. From Sister Joan Chittister, she writes, "The genius of Benedictinism is its concentration on living the active life contemplatively. Benedictine spirituality brings depth and focus to dailiness. Benedictine spirituality is as concerned with the way a thing is done as it is with what is done." So here are some rules from the rule of Benedict. Guests are to be received as Christ. Rule of Benedict 53. Foods are to be selected with care. RB 39. The goods of the monastery are to be treated reverently. RB 32. Pilgrims and the poor are to be treated with special attention. RB 66. And all for the love of Christ. Life is not divided into parts holy and mundane in the rule of Benedict. All of life is sacred. All of life is holy. All of life is to be held in anointed hands. The regular practice of art making helps us to cultivate creative ways of being in the world. Ultimately, our greatest creative act is living our daily lives. Creativity is about making space. It is about listening to ourselves and to the world around us. We must see beyond the surface to the multiple dimensions of the world, opening ourselves to the newness that stirs there. We can cultivate a sense of spontaneity and playfulness while honoring our commitments lovingly and intentionally. Every aspect of our lives can be an arena for creative work. When we make space to breathe deeply in our jobs, relationships, and leisure, we open ourselves up to give voice to vision and birth to newness. Creativity is an essential and life-giving practice that requires spaciousness, attention, and intention in order to flourish. As well, it requires a degree of surrender of our control over the process. Well, we know that one well, don't we? It also requires listening to the wisdom of our intuition, our bodies, and our feelings, while acknowledging that nourishing our creativity is a lifelong journey and process. We also need a community that helps us to discern the creativity that is waiting to be born into our lives. Our call as artists of everyday life is to consecrate the daily with our attention and awareness, and then to bring this holy intimacy with the details of life to the process of creating. Here's a great example from Barbara Brown Taylor. She writes, "Sometimes when people ask me about my prayer life, I describe hanging laundry on the line. After a day of too much information about almost everything, there is such blessed relief in the weight of wet clothes causing the wicker basket to creak as I carry it out to the clothesline. Every time I bend down to shake loose a piece of laundry, I smell the grass. I smell the sun. Above all, I smell clean laundry. This is something concrete that I have accomplished, a rarity in my brainy life of largely abstract accomplishments. I hang each t-shirt like a prayer flag, shaking it first to get the wrinkles out and then pinning it to the line with 2 wooden clothespins. Even the clothespins give me pleasure. I add a prayer for the trees from which these clothespins came, along with the Penley Corporation of West Paris, Maine, which is still willing to make them from wood instead of colored plastic. Much of my own days are spent in a brainy life of largely abstract accomplishments. What Taylor describes here reminds me of my experience of walking as a way of grounding myself in the midst of much thinking. It brings me back to my body. I take pleasure in movement, in the feel of my heart beating strongly, breathing air after a rainfall. Take a walk this week and bring your fullness awareness to the experience. Allow each moment to bring you pleasure. Let each step be a prayer. Hang a piece of laundry and see it become a prayer flag before your eyes. So there's an invitation this week to regard everything in your life as sacred, including the tools you engage for your art making and writing, and to sanctify the space in which you work. It's part of the reason why we've always sort of said sacred time, sacred space, wherever we gather, right? It doesn't mean you have to buy all new things or the most expensive supplies. Far from it. We can be seduced into thinking that buying that stuff will be the answer. Then, once we have all those beautiful objects around us, we are afraid to touch them because what we create or write might not be perfect. The very stuff of your daily life is already sacred. Practice by bringing a sense of reverence to everything you do, both those things that naturally call forth a sense of holy presence and those things that you perhaps dread to do with a sense of drudgery. So here's a question for you to ponder as we go through our prayer practice today. As artists and writers, you may already regard your work as a spiritual practice. But do you engage your tools as holy objects, right? That broken down pencil and that possibly chewed up old paintbrush? Do you regard each implement as a sacred vessel on the altar of your transformation? What might happen if you made this an intentional part of beginning your work? Wonderful, wonderful thoughts. We're going to take it a bit deeper, right, today. Let's just take a moment in prayer. Great Spirit of creation, bless what is given me to use. Bless the dance of making. Bless what is made. From my mind, from my heart, through my hands, it is good, and I am grateful. Amen. Supplies for today are pretty straightforward. Just a light sheet, a white or light colored sheet of paper, be that copy paper or cardstock or watercolor like I have here, and pencil. Just a good old regular pencil is fine. If you've got sketching pencils, that's fine. Something like a little softer, a 2B or a 4B. Gel pens, of course, ballpoint pens, whichever you happen to have. The archival markers like the Sharpie waterproof markers if you want to add color in watercolor after the fact. And then, pencil crayons, regular crayons. Again, whatever you happen to have. All right, and so let's start this process. We're going to get back to our roots a little bit. We're going to do some repetitive pattern work today. This comes from this particular pattern called Sunali. Comes from the world of Zentangle. So just as a heads up. But we like to call what we do here with repeating patterns soul art squiggles. So this is our version of a soul art squiggle. This is the pattern as it is just on its own without the repetition. And then this is the pattern repeated on a fairly small scale. This is a 6x6 square of paper. Okay. And so this is what we're going to do today. And you can do it to whatever degree that you want in regards to how I've sent you out some examples, so you saw that there are, lots of variations that you can do on it. Use your creativity. Make this your own. You can do whatever you want with it. That's the beauty of a basic pattern like this, is that all the sections then inside here, you can do extra pattern if you want, or you could do, flip these corners around so that all 4 corners are the same, and then do one big one in the center and then smaller ones. I could take this and do one of the, flip these 2 around so that it's sort of that circle flower feeling right in the center, and then do these others around the outside. You get my idea. There are lots of variations that you can do, but I'm going to just show you how to do this, and then you may use your creativity to however you would like to finish it off. All right. I took the 9x12 piece of paper that I had. You're going to need square paper for this. So even though I was talking about, an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, you're going to have to square it off. If you don't have scissors, I know from last week's snowflakes that you know how to square off a piece of paper, right? Just fold it in half and then cut off that excess edge. This is from my 9x12 sheet of watercolor paper. I was able to get an 8x8, right, square, and then 2 4x4 squares with just a little extra took it off. So the 4x4 is a great size to do the practice run on this pattern. So give yourself a little extra there if you want the added extra practice. So here is how, and I'm not going to use a pencil, right? Much like we had always done early on in the days of Creative Spirit, we try to not use pencil because we're allowing the creativity, or I should say, we use pencil but not an eraser. Sorry, that's the key. But even still, we go straight with the marker. In this particular case, this is that gel pen. But all right. So the first thing you want to do on your paper is just give yourself, because you're going to freehand a square, right? So I have just gone ahead and I have done 4 little dots. Well, that's what happens oftentimes when you use gel pen. 4 dots, and then I'm just going to freehand connect them. So if it's not a perfectly straight line, that's okay. Right, so you just want to go ahead, and there's my square. Now, once you've got that, you want to divide the square into 4s, into quarters, right? So we're going to draw a vertical line through the half here, and then we're going to draw a line through the horizontal half. Yeah, it looks pretty good. All right, there you are. And then the first thing you're going to want then is to draw these 2 circles, little dots, little black dots, and you can make them as big as small as you want. You can just put a smaller dot and then adjust the size later. But you're going to do 2 dots, and then in that square, you're going to do an arc, right? So the height of the arc, the high point of your arc is going to be sort of directly underneath that dot, right? So we'll start on this side, opposite. We're going to arc around, and we're going to go down to the other side, right? Okay. And so then I rotate the paper. It's a nice thing about these types of patterns, is always rotating the paper is always an ideal situation. So there's my dot. So again, I'm going to make the arc, the high point of the arc, underneath that dot. So I have to start from this edge and arc around to that edge. Okay? Good. And then we want to draw from the corner. We're going to bisect. We're going to split this arc in half. So you're drawing a line, and essentially that line is going to line up either directly with that dot or almost with that dot, right? And then we're going to draw another. We're going to bisect that in half one more time, and then we're going to bisect it here again. All right, so now you have 4 sections to that arc, and then we're going to do it again on the other arc. Again, starting in the corner, sort of following, keeping your eye on that dot, split it in half, and split it in half. Great. So there's half your pattern done. Now, we are going to, the next portion of the pattern has the dot. We're going to do 2 more dots, but again, now these dots, instead of being towards the center corner, these are going to be in the outer corner, right? And so a dot and a dot. But again, you still want the arc at the high point to be going towards that dot. So we'll start on that line and we'll arc and come down, right? Now we're going to rotate our paper. So there's the dot. I want the arc's high point to be just below that dot. So I'm going to start the arc on this line, come around, and there we go. Now we want to divide those arcs in half first, right? So I'm going to start at the center here, looking towards this dot in this corner, and I'm going to divide it in half. And then I'm going to divide one of those little pie sections in half again, or maybe it's like an orange slice, right? You're doing like little orange slices, and divide it in half again. Turn it around. I'm going to divide that slice and that arc in half, and then I'm going to divide that into quarters there, and I'm going to divide this again. So now we've got quarters, and there. That is the basic pattern. All right. Whoops. Just like that. That's your basic pattern without any other drawing or color or. Now the next thing, if you want to just do it in black and white, right, as a trial, or just that you like the black and white, then again you can add pattern anywhere else. But part of the, sorry, actually I apologize. One of the other things about the pattern, it's not fully complete yet, is adding the little, these little portions to the edge of the lines. Now this is not unlike the neurographic art that we had done, right, about rounding out. So you can either round those corners out, or you can give them more of a straight, these I just sort of drew a straight edge, like a V going in towards each of those lines, and then colored it in solid. So that gives, from a distance, it gives it a bit of a different shape versus the rounded shape here. Either way, it doesn't matter. So we'll just, so from this point, now you want to make those little added darker spots. So we'll just do this, we'll just do the V, right? We're just going to make a little V, right, from that outer arc into the line. And then I'm just going to fill it in. Fill it in. All right. There we have those little sections. Now that's the final, the pattern. Now for shading, you can take a regular pencil, whatever you've got that's soft. And I've also got a, maybe I'll try the 2B. No, I'll go with the 4B. So I've got a 4B, but you could use, you know, if you've got a soft pencil, an HB at home, rather than a 2H, just an HB pencil would work. And we would just want to add some shading. The beautiful thing, right, there's really not much difference between these two, except for the fact then that this has some simple pencil shading, and how much more interesting it is just with some simple pencil shading, right? And I know we don't talk about it much because it's just about your creativity and we don't try to get too much into those art details. But I do want to show you a little of the shading today, just because of how much difference it makes. And really it was sort of the basis for this, which is a lot like that one example that I had emailed out to you. Right, so the soft pencil, I'm just going to start with the corners, right, where those lines come to a point. I'm going to start there, and I'm just using the side of my pencil, and I'm just lightly going to add some pencil in those sections. Right, and the same with the ones in the center. Might need a little more there. Just like that. Now, you can use your finger, or you can use your pinky. It's still a finger, but you can use, instead of using your index finger, you could use your pinky. I find sometimes that it's just because it's smaller. And the funny thing is that I find this action on its own sometimes a little difficult. And so I actually grab my pinky and use it like it's like an eraser. It's the craziest thing. I don't know. Let me know after you see this if anybody else does that or not. But it's just that I have a little more control. But you can just use your finger. And yes, then your finger's going to get covered with pencil, okay? The other thing you could do is use a Q-tip. All right, if you have a Q-tip around. So I'm just going to rub that in. It's a little easier to see than with your finger in it, but that's okay. The finger still works. And then if you like it, don't like it, I mean, you can always add a little more if you think, well, it doesn't, you know, the shading didn't go quite as far as I had hoped. So you just add a little bit more. Maybe a little more on this one. This was the one I think I did with my finger. All right, there we go. And then the other place to add some shading is right along the arc, on the inside of the arc, right? So the side that has the bisecting lines in it. Whoops, that's probably a little too much there. So that's the shading there, and you know, then you can go ahead too and you can add a little on the in each corner that has a dot. So just towards the dot, just add a little shading again too. And you can make it darker, right? Like in this one, it's a little bit darker. But there you are. That's the pattern. So that's the big version of the pattern. And then you can decide what you want to do with the pattern, whether you want to add, you know, whether you want to add more lines to it, whether you want to add other shapes to it. Again, if you're not sure about the shading, or if you don't have pencils soft enough, I mean, you could always use a black pencil crayon and do that. But sometimes too, all you really need, you know, if you want that effect, you can add two different colors of pencil crayons. So you can always do, you know, a dark, like in this case, a dark green, and then color in the lighter green. And it kind of gives that same effect. Right? The darker and then into the lighter, and just color over that darker portion in some places. You know, you're coloring over the dark, you're just adding the dark green, and then with the lighter green, you're going over the edges and into the dark green, but not fully covering all the dark green, but you're covering up those edges. And it still gives you that same effect, right? I love going two tones on with pencil crayon like that. Right. Now, if you want to, go ahead and try, like take again, you can take an 8, this is an 8 by 8, and you could, just do this pattern in four places, which is essentially what this is, right? This is the pattern, like this 4 times, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Yeah, and change up the color or do them all in the same color, or it doesn't really matter which way you're going to go with it. But just go ahead and then and again, start with the square. And I would just give yourself those little dots to sort of give your eye a guide. And draw your big square. Again, doesn't matter if it's not perfectly straight. As you can see, mine is not perfectly straight. But again, I rotated the paper. Right? Part of that is trying to keep your hand in whatever position it is most comfortable. If you find pulling your pen is more comfortable than pushing your pen, then make sure the paper is always in a position where then you can pull towards you instead of pushing, or vice versa. All right. And then you're going to divide it in half and you eyeball it. You do not have to take out a ruler. The ruler wasn't on the supplies list. And just draw that half, and you can go ahead and draw your half. And actually, one of the patterns I may have sent you may have had 5. It was a 5 by 5. Because the way that they wanted the pattern to repeat, it had one more row, not a double row, so only half the pattern and then half the pattern here. So it was a 5 by, yeah. So you could always do that too. And that just gave them another sort of ability to finish off part of the pattern right this way. Then it gave this another piece, and in here it gave this one another piece, right? So that was just, yeah. So you could do that too. Experiment. Maybe you like the odd number rows as opposed to the even number rows. So then once you have your sheet, start with the pattern. There's your 4 by 4, and you did your 4. Now decide which way you want your pattern to start. Whether you want to start it this way, so the dots here and the arcs, or whether you want to start it this way, so that these two are the ones that you start with the dots closer, and it goes this way. Doesn't matter, just so, or if you want to do it, if you want to flip it, then experiment. See what happens if you flip it. And the nice thing about actually having one that's like this, well, it's drawn out, it may help you visualize. If I do one like this and then actually flip it, where am I going to get everything happening? Okay, and then enjoy. Pattern it up, color it, paint it. And like I said, this was with I had pencil pastels, And so I was, that allowed the smudging. I love the smudging. The smudging is fun. Of course, I didn't do it with a Q-tip. I was doing it with my fingers, and so it was a little, but it does, if you've got those, and this is actually great too, if you've got watercolor pencils, this is a great one for doing this kind of thing with watercolor pencils, because then you can just draw that line, right, with your watercolor pencil, draw around the outside, and then when you wet it, do the little tiny circles to sort of activate the color, and then pull it down, and you'll still get that whitish area happening, which just sort of makes the whole, it gives dimension. That's the word I'm looking for. It gives dimension to the piece. There. You can tell which ones I had more chalk pencil in than others, but that's all right. Whoops, that's a little green. There must have been a green spot somewhere. Oh well. So that is Sunali. So enjoy. I'm really looking forward to seeing what you end up creating with it. And again, as you sit down, I've got a new prayer coming up as we recenter. So, and that prayer will have been emailed to you. So when you are sitting down with your paper, and even if it's just your paper and a good old pencil, part of that prayer would be to use now, so that you are focused on giving gratitude for even the simplest things, right? And the things that went into creating this, the people and the earth that went into it. And it is a holy, divine, spiritual practice, and everything that you do is, right? So I look forward to hearing about how everybody felt far more motivated and closer to God while they were doing their laundry this week. All right, let's go ahead and recenter. For our recentering today, we're going to do something just a bit different. We're going to, instead of using the prayer that we normally do, that you probably now have committed to memory, I'm going to change it up, and we're going to use the prayer that I used earlier following the reading. So we'll breathe, we'll get your feet flat as you can on the floor, and your back up again, of course. Just get that good deep breath in. And on the way in, say to yourself, holy presence. And on the way out, in every day. And breathing in, holy presence. And on the way out, in the everyday. And one more time, breathing in, holy presence. In the everyday. And together we say, Great Spirit of creation, bless what is given me to use. Bless the dance of making. Bless what is made. From my mind, from my heart, through my hands. It is good. I am grateful. Amen. Have a fabulous week. Enjoy this process. Say that prayer to yourself. I've emailed it out to you, so you do have it. Just to remind yourself again that every portion of what you are doing has sacred in it, right? And it is divine, and you are divine. Have a wonderful week, and I'll see you next week. Bye.